The life of Mary Ann Shadd. Mary Ann Shadd Cary was an American-Canadian who fought against slavery. She was the first Black woman to start a newspaper in North America and was also one of the first Black women to study law in the U.S. She ran a newspaper called the Provincial Freeman, which encouraged Black people in Canada and the U.S. to learn and fight for their rights. Mary's family helped slaves escape to freedom. When a law in 1850 made it dangerous for escaped slaves in the U.S., her family moved to Canada. During the American Civil War, she went back to the U.S. to help get soldiers for the Army. She learned a lot on her own and also went to Howard University Law School. Throughout her life, she fought for the rights of Black people and women. Mary Ann Shadd was born on October 9, 1823, in Wilmington, Delaware. She was the oldest of 13 siblings in a free African-American family. Her father, Abraham D. Shadd, was a descendant of Hans Shadd, also known as John Shadd. Hans was originally from Hesse Castle and came to the United States as a soldier for the British during the French and Indian War. D. Shadd worked as a shoemaker in Wilmington and then in Westchester, Pennsylvania. He helped slaves escape as a part of the Underground Railroad and stood up for civil rights. He was a key member of the American Anti-Slavery Society. In 1833, he became the president of a big convention in Philadelphia that aimed to help free people of color. 3 years after the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 was passed, A.D. Shadd moved his family to Canada West, specifically North Buxton, Ontario. In 1858, he made history by being one of the first Black men to win an election in Canada, becoming a councillor for Raleigh Township, Ontario. In 1848, Frederick Douglass, through his newspaper The North Star, asked for ideas on improving the lives of African Americans. A 25-year-old Shadd responded, saying, "We should do more and talk less." She was frustrated that despite numerous conventions, like the ones her father attended, discussing the wrongs of slavery and the rights of African Americans, not much had changed. Douglass featured her thoughts in his newspaper. Fugitive slave law of 1850 risked forcing free Blacks and escaped slaves back into slavery. Shadd and her brother Isaac relocated to Windsor, Ontario, near Detroit. It was here that Shadd started her work on establishing free Black communities in Canada. In Windsor, Shadd started an integrated school, supported by the American Missionary Association, since Ontario's public education system was closed to Black students. Her school held daytime sessions for kids and evening ones for adults. In 1852, she wrote a pamphlet called A Plea for Emigration. It talked about the advantages of moving and highlighted opportunities for Blacks in Canada and other places. In 1853, Shadd started an anti-slavery newspaper named the Provincial Freeman. Although it promised content on anti-slavery, temperance, and literature, it could only run for 4 years due to funding issues. Knowing society's views on women during the 19th century, Shadd thought her name might deter readers. So, she collaborated with Samuel Ringgold Ward, a Black abolitionist, and Reverend Alexander MacArthur, a white pastor, to help her run the paper. Though their names were prominently displayed, Shadd was the driving force behind the scenes. Isaac Shadd, Mary Ann's brother, handled the day-to-day operations of the Provincial Freeman. He was a dedicated abolitionist and even organized meetings at his house to strategize about events like the Harper's Ferry raid. Mary Ann Shadd traveled extensively in both Canada and the U.S. to gain more subscribers and raise support for escaped slaves. However, due to the Fugitive Slave Act, her travels were dangerous as free Black individuals could be seized by those hunting for runaway slaves. The Provincial Freeman was crucial for the Black community, serving as a platform for Black Canadian anti-slavery advocates to voice their views. Between 1850 and 1860, African American newspapers played a crucial role in the abolitionist movement. Despite the difficulties in maintaining regular publication, publishers, including Shadd, were driven by a dedication to education and advocacy, using their platforms to sway public opinion. These publications faced financial, political, and societal hurdles. In Racial Uplift, the 19th century thought of Black newspaper publisher Mary Ann Shadd Cary and author Carol B. Conaway highlights how these newspapers shifted attention from white narratives to Black perspectives, empowering the African American community. Conaway notes that many white individuals read these papers to gauge the discontent of African Americans with their treatment and to assess their acceptance of ongoing slavery in the U.S. Black newspapers often took inspiration from mainstream white publications. As highlighted by William David Sloan in his historical studies, early newspapers typically span about 4 pages, with one page left blank. This blank space allowed readers to pen their personal information or messages before sharing the paper with friends or family. Sloan emphasizes that in those early times, newspapers were crucial sources of societal and cultural information. In 1854, Shadd made a bold move by placing her name on the newspaper's masthead, replacing MacArthur and Ward's names. She even brought in her sister to assist with editing tasks. However, this change was met with significant criticism, leading Shadd to step down from her position the subsequent year. Between 1855 and 1856, Shadd traveled across the U.S., promoting anti-slavery and urging racial integration through education and self-reliance. She encouraged blacks to demand fair treatment and, if necessary, to pursue legal action. In 1855, she wanted to join the Philadelphia Colored Convention, but it had never allowed women. The attendees debated whether to admit her. Given her views on emigration, she was a divisive figure, and she was narrowly allowed in by just 15 votes. Even though she gave a passionate speech at the convention, which was well received, her contribution was mostly left out of the official records, probably due to her being a woman. Frederick Douglass's paper noted that after her initial speech, the delegates were so impressed that they granted her an additional 10 minutes to speak. In 1856, she married Thomas F. Carey, a Toronto barber who also worked with the Provincial Freeman. Together, they had 2 children, Sarah and Linton. In 1858, Shadd Carey joined the Chatham Vigilance Committee, which aimed to stop escaped slaves from being sent back to the U.S. and into slavery again. After the death of her husband in 1860, she and her kids went back to the U.S. During the Civil War, influenced by abolitionist Martin Delany, she recruited black soldiers for the Union Army in Indiana. After the Civil War, Shadd Carey taught in Wilmington's black schools. Later, she and her daughter moved to Washington, D.C., where she taught in public schools for 15 years. At 60, she graduated from Howard University School of Law, becoming the U.S.'s second black female law graduate. She contributed to the National Era and the People's Advocate newspapers and founded the Colored Women's Progressive franchise in 1880. She also joined the National Women's Suffrage Association, collaborating with Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton on women's rights. She was the first African American woman to vote in a U.S. national election and even testified before the House Judiciary Committee. Shadd Carey passed away from stomach cancer on June 5, 1893, in Washington, D.C., and was laid to rest at Columbian Harmony Cemetery. Mary Ann Shadd Carey's life was a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who fight for justice, equity, and the upliftment of their community. As a pioneering black woman journalist, an educator, a lawyer, and an activist, she broke barriers, challenged societal norms, and worked relentlessly to elevate the status of African Americans, both in Canada and the U.S. Her numerous contributions, from publishing to advocating for women's suffrage, highlight a life lived with purpose and passion. Even in the face of adversity, her unwavering commitment to the causes she believed in showcased the profound impact one individual can make. Today, as we reflect on her legacy, we are reminded of the power of resilience, determination, and the quest for equality. Mary Ann Shadd Carey's story is not just a chapter in history but an inspiration for all those who aspire to make a difference.